Krelix, once a name whispered with equal measures of fear and awe, had a problem. His hand, once an extension of death itself, trembled. Invisible weights burdened his movements, once as fluid as starlight. It wasn't age. Zithians held their prime for centuries, yet a creeping frailty now clung to him like a parasite. Worst of all was the hesitation, the split-second delays that were the difference between a clean kill and a very messy escape. He was dying, not in body, but in spirit. The thrill of the hunt, the symphony of a target's last panic breaths, all had faded to a dull echo. His peers whispered of burnout, of hunts taken too far, of enemies left alive to hatch vengeance. They offered solutions steeped in Zithian tradition, meditation, ritual purification, weeks spent in sensory deprivation seeking a realignment of the self. Krelix had tried them all, each more useless than the last. No, his cure, if there was one, lay beyond Zithian ways. He'd observed other species seeking patterns. Humans, those infuriatingly illogical primates, seemed particularly adept at pulling victory from the jaws of disaster. They didn't overthink, didn't hesitate, they acted. Perhaps their chaos held a key that he lacked. The idea was insane, an admission of weakness more shameful than any botched contract. An apprentice? Worse, a human apprentice? Krelix hissed, the sound grating in his throat. Yet, as his fingers brushed the hilt of his vibroblade, the tremor a mockery of his former self, he knew that insanity held more promise than his current path. Finding a suitable human proved unexpectedly difficult. Not because they were scarce, the galaxy teemed with them, but they were loud, graceless, and most damningly of all, predictable. Krelix didn't need a soldier, easily slotted into Zithian discipline. He needed the opposite, a hurricane given humanoid form. His search led him to a grimy backwater world, a hive of scum perfect for hiding in plain sight. In a shadowy cantina, amidst the stench of sweat and cheap stimulants, he found his hurricane. The human, known only as Jake, was losing a rigged card game with spectacular flair. His outrage, the curses flung with both passion and unexpected creativity, were a symphony compared to the droning din of the bar. Even as armed thugs closed in, Jake wore a smirk, not of fear, but of a predator sizing up its prey. The brawl that erupted was less a fight, more a force of nature. Jake moved without grace, all flailing limbs and mistimed blows, yet he was diabolically effective. Tables overturned, bottles shattered, and the thugs ended up a groaning pile on the floor. It was ugly, messy, and undeniably brilliant. Krelix stepped from the shadows. The contrast between the Zithian precision and the chaos Jake left in his wake, stark as night and day. "Interested in a job offer?" he rasped. Jake blinked and then erupted into laughter. "Selling me a scrap metal? Buddy, take a closer look. There ain't a single working cybernetic in me." Krelix ignored the jab. "Not that kind of job. And the pay." He gestured to the unconscious thugs. "Will beat whatever you're scamming here." A flicker of interest crossed Jake's face. "Scamming? Those morons just need to learn to count cards better," he huffed indignantly, then paused. "Wait, what kind of job are we talking? 'Cause I ain't much for—" His gaze swept the remains of the brawl, and he grinned. "Well, subtlety." A tremor threatened to overtake Krelix's hand, but he forced it still. This reckless whirlwind of a human might be precisely what he needed. "You'll learn," he rasped, "if you survive." Jake's grin widened. In that dingy cantina, with the stink of failure clinging to Krelix, a dangerous gamble flickered into existence. Krelix, the galaxy's deadliest assassin, wasn't just hunting a way to reclaim his former glory. Alongside this unlikely human, he was hunting for a way to evolve. He just hoped they wouldn't both get killed in the process. "Survive?" Jake echoed, cocking his head. Then, as if deciding this wasn't a real concern, he shrugged. "All right, old-timer, lay this job on me. Just remember, I work for credits, not promises." The blatant disrespect would usually have earned a swift, lethal lesson, yet Krelix found it strangely invigorating. "The learning," he rasped. ignoring the unfamiliar tightness in his throat. Begins now. And so began their twisted, unorthodox training. Krellix's ship, once a sanctuary of precision and silence, thrummed with Jake's boundless energy. Every lesson, stealth, infiltration, weapons handling, turned into a clash of philosophies. Jake scoffed at practice forms, at meditation before action. "Thinking too much gets you killed," he'd mutter while practicing a particularly complex vibroblade maneuver. Predictably, the blade would clatter to the floor. Yet hours later, under the pressure of a surprise spar, he'd execute the same move flawlessly, instinct overriding fumbled technique. "You analyze everything to death," Jake accused after Krellix spent an infuriating hour detailing the workings of a thermal detonator. "What's wrong with it goes boom?" Krellix bristled. Yet, amidst the arguments and exasperated hisses, something shifted within him. Jake's recklessness became less a point of annoyance, more a puzzle to be solved. The human cared not for the elegance of the kill, only the end result. There was a brutal efficiency there, one Krellix had disregarded along with his own youthful impulsiveness. Their first contract together was, appropriately, a disaster. The target, a Hutt crime lord with a fondness for elaborate security, was the perfect test of Zithian methods. Krellix planned meticulously, infiltration routes, guard patterns, an escape plan with 3 contingencies in case of complications. Jake listened with ill-concealed boredom, fidgeting throughout the briefing. As predicted, the infiltration went flawlessly, until Jake, with an exasperated growl, simply kicked down a door rather than disable the complex locking mechanism. Alarms blared, plans shattered, and their escape became a mad scramble through the Hutt's palace. By all rights, they should have died there, riddled with blaster fire, yet, in the chaos Jake had unleashed, Krellix saw something new. The panicked guards overcompensated, their shots going wild. Hutt henchmen, bulky and slow, stumbled under Jake's frantic, unpredictable attack. In the eye of the storm, Krellix saw openings he would never have noticed before. The target died not with Zithian elegance, but a blaster jammed into his flabby throat, discharged at point-blank range. They escaped, barely, smelling of blaster burns and with enough close calls to last a lifetime. Back on the ship, Krellix expected a confrontation. Instead, Jake flopped onto a worn couch, a triumphant grin splitting his face. "See? Boom. Told you thinking too much was a problem." It was the last thing Krellix wanted to admit, but the human was right. Not entirely, of course, but the seed of a terrifying truth had taken root. Precision and planning had become his cage. The change wasn't immediate. Old habits were as resistant to death as some of their targets. Krellix's tremors didn't vanish overnight, but his hesitation did. Amidst Jake's relentless energy, his instinct to overanalyze slowly loosened its grip. He started taking calculated risks, slipping elements of Jake's unpredictable style into his own lethal repertoire. Word spread quickly through the galactic underworld. Krellix was back, but different. The flawless assassin was gone, replaced by something more volatile, more dangerous. Old rivals sensing weakness sent their own killers. They underestimated the chaotic harmony emerging from Krellix and his unorthodox apprentice. One assassin, a Slithian renowned for dissolving victims alive, made the mistake of targeting Jake. The human predictably reacted with loud, blundering fury rather than a stealthy retreat, yet the Slithians, so used to measured prey, overplayed their hand. Krellix, exploiting his momentary distraction, struck with a speed that defied his usual careful pace. The acid meant for Jake splattered harmlessly against the force shield, and the Slithian's shriek ended with a sickening gurgle. Jake stood over the remains, grinning in a feral triumph. "That," he crowed, "was almost fun." Krellix shuddered. It was a monstrous path they walked, a descent stripped of any illusions of honor. He knew Jake understood this, accepted it in a way Krellix no longer could. Yet, his hesitation had given way to a different sort of certainty. In this deadly dance, they needed each other. The balance, fragile as it was, worked. Contracts that would have once seemed impossible became merely challenging. With Jake as the disruptive force, Krellix rediscovered his killer's edge. he taught the human in turn, honing the raw instinct into something resembling technique. Jake learned to read situations, not just react. His wild charges now calculated enough to draw out predictable responses from the enemies. Yet, their growing notoriety was a double-edged sword. Rivals weren't the only ones taking notice. A Transition bounty hunter, notorious for tracking those who went to ground, was now sniffing out their trail. Even worse, Krelix's mysterious tremors occasionally returned when they were least expected, threatening to betray him in crucial moments. He feared that soon, not even Jake's reckless brilliance could protect them. The Transition eventually cornered them on a remote, lawless planetoid, forcing a confrontation Krelix longed to avoid. Firefights erupted in grimy spaceports. A chase ensued through toxic wastelands. It all became a blur of blaster fire and adrenaline, pushing Krelix and Jake to their limits. The Transition wasn't just skilled, but brutal. The kind of hunter fueled by hatred as much as credits. In the end, it was the most basic of weapons that sealed their fate. Driven into an abandoned mining complex, the Transition cornered Jake. Krelix, a tremor racking his arm, struggled to disable an old thermal detonator, the same kind he'd berated Jake over months prior. Then, something changed. In Jake's eyes, Krelix saw not fear, but that familiar, reckless defiance. With a roar of frustration, Jake charged the Transition, not with any finesse or strategy, but with the blind fury of a cornered animal. The bounty hunter, expecting a calculated attack, was caught off guard. Then, the tremor in Krelix's hand vanished. The detonator, armed, sailed through the air in a perfect arc. The explosion wasn't elegant, merely loud and blinding. But when the dust settled, the Transition was gone, leaving behind only scorched armor and a lesson hard-earned. Hesitation killed. Instinct, honed and tempered in the fires of chaos, saved. In the aftermath, as they limped back to their battleship, Krelix found himself staring at Jake with a newfound respect. The human was sprawled on the deck, nursing several laser burns and grinning maniacally. "Well, old-timer, we ain't boring, are we?" Jake rasped, the bravado masking a hint of weariness that mirrored Krelix's own. A strange sensation stirred in Krelix's chest. Acknowledgement, perhaps, or even a gratitude for this whirlwind in human form. "No," he agreed, the word rough in his throat. "We are not." The silence that followed wasn't the usual comfortable quiet of old partners. It crackled with unspoken questions. For Krelix, it was an acceptance that his old ways were gone forever. The precise, solitary assassin was dead, replaced by something less certain, yet undeniably alive. And for Jake, Krelix suspected the human was realizing this was more than just a well-paying gig. He'd become part of something far more dangerous, a darkly twisted legacy he likely hadn't bargained for. There was no time for long reflections. The underworld didn't pause for sentiment, yet Krelix allowed himself a rare moment of grim optimism. The tremors still visited him from time to time, a phantom of the killer he used to be. But now, he had a weapon against the encroaching weakness. Jake pushed himself up, wincing, as he surveyed their damaged ship. "I take it there's another glorious contract waiting," he quipped, the smirk returning. Krelix grunted. The sound almost resembled a laugh. "There's always another contract." He turned towards the cockpit, his steps steadier than they had been in months. "And this time, I think we'll try something a bit more chaos." He left it unspoken, but Jake's answering grin said he understood. They weren't just a teacher and an apprentice, nor merely partners in crime. They were the embodiment of a deadly paradox, where the rigid learned to bend and the chaotic found focus. The galaxy hadn't just gotten its deadliest assassin back, it had gotten something far more unpredictable. Their growing reputation became a beacon, attracting both ambitious clients and trouble of the most lethal kind. Krelix, finally embracing the shift within him, planned elaborate heists and assassinations that bore the hallmarks of both meticulous preparation and explosive, unpredictable execution. Jake thrived in this new rhythm, his raw talent honed into a weapon that could shift the tide of seemingly any lost battle. However, there were whispers in the underworld that someone was pulling the strings behind the scenes. A shadowy figure manipulating the events and profiting from the chaos Krelix and Jake left in their wake. Krelix dismissed the rumors at first, He'd danced with the shadowy manipulators before, always outsmarting them in the end, yet this felt different. There was a cunning twist to the contracts they were offered, a sense that they were being played rather than playing the game. The sense of unease reached its new peak during a raid on a heavily fortified corporate vault. Every escape route Krelix had meticulously mapped out was blocked, forcing them into a desperate improvisation that bordered on suicidal. Jake was in his element, reveling in the exhilarating dance of death, but Krelix felt an icy dread that had nothing to do with the blaster fire rattling down on them. They barely escaped with the loot and their lives intact. Back on the ship, surveying their wounds, Krelix made a chilling realization. Their mysterious benefactor wasn't just profiting from their actions. They were actively shaping them, pushing them towards greater risks, towards the precipice of disaster. "We're being played," Krelix rasped, a tremor threatening to overtake his hand. He ruthlessly forced it down. He would not show weakness, not now. Jake, uncharacteristically subdued, nodded slowly. "Felt it too. Like someone's betting on how long we'll last." Krelix paced, his Zithian mind seeking patterns, solutions. His gaze fell on the comm unit, a silent mockery of their isolation. "Then we change the game," he declared, his voice thick with a newfound resolve. They turned hunters. No more contracts, no more daring raids. Instead, they delved into the murky underbelly of the galactic underworld, tracking the elusive flicker of their manipulator through the tangled web of informants, shady deals, and whispers echoing through grimy cantinas. Krelix, with his honed instincts and a lifetime of navigating deadly intrigues, was now driven by something greater than mere survival. It was about reclaiming their agency, about refusing to be pawns in some unknown power broker's twisted game. Jake, used to being the unpredictable element, surprised Krelix with an unexpected patience. He learned the art of blending in, his brash exterior becoming a camouflage for a now shrewdly focused mind. Their search led them to a nameless asteroid base, a haven for pirates, smugglers, and those who wished to vanish from the galaxy's prying eyes. Infiltrating it proved nearly impossible. The base was a fortress, paranoia and firepower its primary defense. That's when Jake, in a stroke of either genius or outright insanity, got himself purposefully captured during a staged bar brawl. Imprisoned within the base's bowels, Jake seemingly reverted to his chaotic roots. He riled up his fellow inmates, instigated fights, and turned their claustrophobic detention cell into a battleground. Krelix, exploiting the distraction, slipped through the shadows like a wraith, his movements guided by intel Jake had risked his life to smuggle out. Step by step, Krelix moved closer to the base's core, his presence barely a whisper amidst the manufactured chaos. He discovered heavily encrypted data logs, coded transmissions, and finally, a name. Silas Core, a shadowy information broker notorious for buying and selling secrets that could topple empires. Core was the puppeteer, manipulating events to sow discord and profit from the bloodshed, and Krelix was about to cut the strings. Armed with irrefutable proof of Core's schemes, Krelix triggered the prison riot Jake had so painstakingly orchestrated. The explosion of violence became their cover as they fought their way back to their hidden ship, now fueled by a righteous fury. They broadcasted Core's manipulations to every bounty hunter, pirate lord, and rival gang with a score to settle against the elusive information broker. Within hours, Silas Core's hidden empire was ablaze. Previously loyal clients turned against him, his networks of informants crumbled, and his meticulously crafted anonymity was torn apart with brutal efficiency. The hunters had become the hunted. Krelix and Jake watched from a distance as Core's asteroid base descended into a self-destructive inferno. It was a victory, but one devoid of any satisfaction. In exposing their unseen enemy, they had revealed themselves too. The galaxy now knew the volatile storm that was their partnership, and there would be repercussions. "Guess there's no going back to quiet contracts, huh?" Jake remarked, a wry grin twisting on his lips. "No," Krelix rasped, a strange echo of acceptance in his voice. "But I do believe we've proven ourselves quite capable of handling the consequences." Their hunted days were far from over. Rivals, eager to claim the notoriety of taking down Krelix, emerged from the shadows. Governments, threatened by their uncontrolled existence, declared bounties high enough to tempt even the most seasoned killers. But through it all, there was an undeniable certainty in Krelix now. His tremors had vanished entirely, replaced by a relentless, honed focus. He and Jake faced each new threat not with hesitation, but with terrifying synergy that they had forged. Their legend became a twisted inspiration in the galactic underworld. Some whispered of a suicidal pact, of two predators destined to consume each other. Others spoke of a dark brotherhood, forged in blood and bounty by mutual necessity. The true purpose that had initially driven them, Krelix seeking an end to his decline, Jake craving credits and a release from his mundane existence, faded into irrelevance. They now existed in a space beyond mere survival. They had become the embodiment of calculated chaos, the galaxy's uncertain given deadly form. Krelix, the once cold and solitary assassin, had found a purpose he never dreamed of, not in precision, but in the blazing fire of his unpredictable human apprentice. And Jake, the street-smart survivor, had stumbled into a legacy that would forever be etched in the darkest corners of the galaxy. They were bound together, teacher and student, the rigid and the chaotic, forever locked in their deadly dance. Their enemies would fall, their legend would grow, and the only certainty was that their story was far from over.